topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Well, good evening, and welcome to another fabulous time of conversation and discussion. And I'm sitting here bopping to the music like bound, bound, bound. Hey, I like that. It just gets you in the mood. God just really anointed that child. You hear me? That theme music, that intro and outro music was created by my baby boy. Yes, I'm telling you, in his bedroom with his little keyboard, laptop, and just amazing. But I love the song. Anyway, where are my manners? Good evening to everybody out there in viewership land. I had to say that real soft and slow because I could have been saying something else. And I've been the talk of the town. Everybody be on the show next week. They're like, did you hear what she said? Okay, I'm sorry. Well, good evening, ladies. Everybody say, hey. Yes. I'm not acting up because it's Black History Month. I act like this all the time. And in most cases, I get paid to act. All right? Okay, there we go. Trey from around the way. What's happening up there?
Hey. Ooh, a little nippy, but not too bad. And looking forward to the warmer weather. I think we're supposed to be in the 60s on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So bring it on.
Oh, bless your heart. I can't even imagine it's being cold elsewhere. That's really wild. Tommy, unmute and say hey.
Hey. I'm in the house.
How you doing? You doing good? Y'all had a good week? Had a blessed week? Had a productive week? Amen. Did you rest? You had a restful week.
Yes.
You can rest, but yet be productive. So we always want you to rest, but yet be productive. Amen. You got to do that. Well, as you know, first Monday in the month, we only get 28 days of this. So we got to make every little piece, every little comma, every little period, semicolon, exclamation count this month. And we have to do it almost every day. So we're going to start out because as if we got new people on, because I did invite some people. I was on a Zoom call, Teams meet call today. So I put it out there, putting it out there a little bit more in these basic conferences, conference calls and stuff. You invite me to your meeting. So I'm going to invite you to this meeting. Amen. Because other people that I know don't view. So there we go. I ain't going there this year. Hallelujah. Any old way. I love this month in the sense that for this show, what we're going to be talking about, because we got to go, really into the crevice now a little bit. We got to really dig it up and dig up some myths on both sides of culture and talk about the hard conversations that nobody else really want to have. Everybody wants to talk about the past. And I get that. For some, that's all they have. And God had to help me to understand that some people cannot move forward because of their traumas, their experiences, their memories. Some people just cannot move forward. And you have to identify who you're dealing with, who's on your boards, who's in your churches, who's in the congregation, who your neighbors are. You got to just figure that out, because you will burn yourself out trying to make them or try to, engage in conversation that they don't want to have. I've had to tell so many people this week. They were like, they just don't understand. And I waited till they finished. I said, they don't want to understand. They don't want to help. They want chaos. They want conflict. You got to put it out there. Some people want to fight. Some people want to fight. These kids that are going to schools, elementary, middle school, high school, they're used to seeing people fighting. They came in this world. The mother carried them, and they could hear people cursing and fussing and all that and threatening and everything. They came in this world hearing that stuff, and nobody corrected them. So please know your audience. Know who's in your crowd, who's on your team. I've been watching some awesome movies that when it gets down to fighting, everybody gets their backs to each other, and so they can see from all direction. I'm looking for that team. I'm looking for that kind of squad. Not saying, well, what we gonna do? What we gonna do? What we gonna do? That's the type of person, that's the type of people that you want to surround yourself with. Not so much fighting physically, but fighting spiritually, fighting emotionally, making sure that you are okay. But we got to go back. Talking about Black history, racial issues, racial trauma. In a report that I just did for class, I found out in the world of religion and religious hurts, most people want to call it church hurt, but it's called betrayal trauma. Betrayal trauma in religion. And I'm writing my paper on it in a few weeks. Betrayal trauma. You've got to ask your coworkers why they seem to want to refrain from talking about certain things, or refrain themselves from being around the loudest person in the room. It's almost like so timid and everything. You have to stop and say, not why as a confrontation, but hey, Peggy, we need to have a talk. Let's go to lunch. What has been your experience when it comes to race and culture? That's soft, that's non-threatening, but you would be surprised to hear what Peggy has to say. Where her timidness and her, I don't want to be in that group. We have a couple of my fellow students, classmates. One of my classmates former classmates called me the other day, and she said, yeah, so-and-so is in another cohort. I said, really? She goes, yeah, they're predominantly white. And the professors all that teach that session are white. I was like, really? Now the student presents well with me, but see, you never know what they're thinking. You never know what drives their decisions. You never know. Some people can't take you being, they call me aggressive because I talk loud, but I talk with strength. I talk with purpose. I'm just passionate. And my voice just happens to go up a level or two. I don't, because you get all into it. You got to take the time. I think one of them, I'm going to let the ladies come on in here now, because this is how this is going. This is going to be a part 1 tonight. And then we're going to come back and later in the month and we're going to do part 2, because we've got to talk about this. Just in case you all didn't know, those of you who live in Florida, your governor just came out at his little meeting at his state college, where it's liberal and is teaching traditional courses back to the founding fathers and what they meant. I don't know how he know what they meant, but he is not only going after DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion courses, but he's going after forget about critical race theory. You don't have to even put CRT out there. He's going after African American studies. And he made it clear. He's already told all state universities in Florida, all state universities and colleges, send us all your description of your coursework, their descriptions, and how much does it cost for that class, for you to teach that class. So what are you paying your professors? What do you pay the staff? What portion does the school get? Send us the whole budget for every class on African American studies. Then, in the same breath, he said, because we're no longer going to pay for it. Because we're thinking you're going to use the language of that's challenging and uncomfortable for the masses. I said, oh, ain't this something? Now, check this out. And ladies, get ready to unmute. While the world is looking at all the deaths that have occurred, the murders that have occurred in this past week or so, China said, oh, they're distracted. So let's send a balloon, a hot air balloon that they've never done before in the history of mankind. Oh, we're just checking the weather. Well, if you believe that I've got some land in the intercoast over in the Everglades that I'm selling $5 a plot. $5 a plot. And the world said, well, look at that. Oh, look, wonder what that is. And then it got back to your president, and he's like, well, I don't know what that is. And they're like, well, did they ask for permission to fly in our airspace? He said, well, I didn't look at it like that. And I'm no Kamala probably just say, Joe, it's China. And they're documenting. And oddly enough, somebody plotted that ironically, the lands or the states they flew over happen to be high military oriented places, states that have facilities in it. But we're all looking at this. Now, while y'all looking at the hot air balloon, Florida's governor is over here saying we taking out African-American history. And I'm going to do it this way. And this is the gentleman that's preparing himself to be your president. So can you imagine if he does that to Florida, being the president? I can't even talk about HBCUs. They're state colleges. Some of them are private. He's going to figure out a way. If they receive federal funding, he's going to figure out a way. Then I've got Black people who are now angry. They're not angry so much that the Black officers murdered this young man. They're angry that the Black officers were fired so immediately compared to white officers who were placed on desk duty, still given their pay, and so they were going to under investigation, and then months later they'll be found guilty, and then they would lose their job. I got people stuck at, oh my God, look what happened, because they were Black officers. No. Can we go back a little bit? They trailed this boy. They knew where he was going to be. They trailed him. They snatched him out of a car. And we still don't have the backstory. So far, we just know that he and an ex of a deputy worked together. Now, I don't know about you, Trey. I know when we were back in Palm Beach County, I don't think we ever had lunch together, but it wouldn't be unusual if you and I, knowing each other, would go out to lunch together. You're my coworker. You're my colleague. Tommy, it wouldn't be an odd thing. You're my former student. You're my friend. It wouldn't be odd for us to go to Bahama Breeze and have lunch. So why can't two coworkers go out to lunch? If that's the story, that's the narrative right now. Watch your narratives. Watch your narratives, because I've got to go back and find out why you had what trauma. What experience, you may not call it trauma, what experience, what memory do you have when it comes to dealing with other cultures and interacting, playing with other cultures? Were you at a school where a white teacher told you, okay, Jimmy, no, don't go over there. Don't go over there with Freddie. Y'all, okay, Jimmy, you go over here play on the monkey bars. Freddie, you go over there in the dirt, play in the sandbox. Did you have that kind of experience? What kind of experience did you have? And then I'm going to talk about my experience, why I look at life through a different color, through a different lens. I'll tell you that, ladies.
I think growing up, well, when I was born, we were living in one house. When I turned 5, 6, I think we moved into the area that we're in now. The neighborhood that we moved from was historically Black area. From my understanding, it was owned by Hampton Institute years ago. And it was an area where more affluent folks of color lived. And so, and there was a time, so I'm going to tell my age, my age is going to show a little bit. So it wasn't very many opportunities for people of color in certain areas who were trying to buy homes. My sisters grew up in that area, and so the school that they went to was all Black. The elementary school that they grew up in. The elementary school that I went to was diverse. And I'm going to tell you how diverse it was. We learned, I wish I was in the land of cotton. Old times good and none forgotten. My sisters didn't learn that. So because our area was, it was a whole different thing. And I think the school that they went to was predominantly Black, if not all Black teachers. The school my younger sister and I went to, it was more white teachers than Black teachers. And so it was very different. The neighborhood that we moved in was diverse. It wasn't a whole lot of people in the neighborhood. It was just developing. I remember the first young lady I met, first girl I met, she actually came over and introduced herself. It was a white girl. And we became very good friends. And so, of course, we went to school together, went to the same elementary school. So it was it was diverse. When I went to middle school, it was diverse. Now, the high school that my sisters went to, in fact, I think that junior high they went to, it wasn't, we all went to the same junior high, actually. And it wasn't as diverse. I think it was predominantly white. And I know when they went to the high school, that definitely was predominantly white. And the first year that I entered, which was 10th grade, that was the first year that it was the most integrated it had been. And it was that way simply because they had closed one of the schools where predominantly Black would be going. And that was a whole different experience. So if you talk to people who were coming to that school, who were supposed to have gone to another school, they weren't met with open arms. There were derogatory comments written on the side of the wall, the N-word. It was a tough time for, a lot of folks at that particular time. So we're talking about maybe early 80s. So that was definitely different experience. So, but the experience I have was diverse population, simply because we're in an area where it's military. So military was in, military was out. When my dad, when we moved out here, he was on his way to retirement from the military. So, this community is diverse based on that. So, I have an experience with all of that. I guess those different cultures. And so the Asian cultures that were here, you had, it was some Latino, not a whole lot. Through my experience, it was some people Latino. But I know when I moved to Florida, that was when I encountered more others, cultures, Haitian, Barbados, Trinidad, African, those particular. So it was definitely Jamaican. So it was definitely a switch. But as far as diversity, You know, I think I've had a good experience, and I have my Facebook page. It's a lot of diverse folks, and I think too people need to look and see who is on your friends list. How are you learning about different cultures? What is it that you know about the African American culture or the Asian culture or the other cultures that are out there? What is your experience? What is your history with that? Because when I first moved down to Florida, a lot of people that I met that are people of color did not say a whole lot of positive interactions from folks who were white, and simply because their history was different. I moved down to a migrant town where the people who were in the fields pretty were the people of color, and the people who owned the fields were people who were white. So it was different. They had a different experience than I had. So it was definitely an eye-opener thing to just kind of see how people tick and see how people think. But I think the more diversity that you have in your friends, the better you are. The more open you can, it's always good to learn, because how can you live in a world with a whole lot of different people and you don't know anything or afraid of, Muslims? If you don't understand Muslim, learn, read up on it. And I think we're too busy depending on others' things to dictate what we learn. And I remember growing up, it wasn't a whole lot of in school learning, not when I came up, about African American history. And I was fortunate to have an 8th grade teacher that taught a lot of it. But then I was very fortunate too that came from a family, and that's what we discussed. We learned about history, and my parents brought us books about Black history. Anything for us to learn more about it, because we weren't getting, my younger sister and I weren't getting that from the elementary school like my older sisters had. So it was a definitely different taste. And then I went to a HBCU, and it's actually the eldest HBCU. So that's Cheyney University in Pennsylvania. That's the oldest HBCU and part of the Underground Railroad. I think down the street it was a place where slaves were born. And so it's a lot of history. So, I learned about different things even prior to that. Like I said, family. My family talked about racism and their experiences and cultural differences. So I think the more you learn, the less fearful you are about it.
Well, I guess I was different because I was born and raised in Jacksonville. And in the area where I grew up, by the time, my parents moved from the history I know. Initially, they stayed what they call the East Side, which was predominantly Black. Then they started building homes on the West Side. I mean, it was northwest, and the community was Black. My elementary school, all the way up till I got into the 5th grade, which that was the beginning of diversifying schools by integration. So my 5th grade year, I went to what was considered a predominantly white school. We were bused over to the school, which we were probably about 20 minutes away, 25 minutes away from home, which we used to walk down the street to school 1st through 4th grade. So the 5th grade year, we were bused. 6th grade, we came back to our elementary school, which they made it a 6th grade center. So only that initial 5th grade, I was in an interracial school. So luckily, the teacher that we knew, it was a Black teacher from the school we came from, he ended up was our teacher. And so we had a Black male teacher that played a very big part in our lives. And he helped a lot of the young boys, introduce them to sports and different things, because a lot of them, that's the way they were able to overcome the streets and go and pursue an education. Because I have a couple of very good friends now today are very successful because of his mentoringship towards them. Now, we did have dads in the neighborhood and everything, so it wasn't as common as today, where um just thinking back, a couple of months ago, one of my girlfriend oldest brother in the neighborhood, and I'm saying in the neighborhood about 4 or 5 blocks, he was the only dad, and his family was the only family with a mom and a dad, and a functional dad that mentored a lot of the boys around the neighborhood. They would come over from blocks over, and he would take them on a job and teach them this, that, and the other, because he was in carpentry. So he taught those little skills, and he would take them all and give them a little piece of change for hanging out with him that day. But just thinking back, my 5th grade year and then my 8th grade year, I went to a predominantly white school. We were bused again. And I learned the interaction with them a little different, but yet the same. I got introduced to soccer. We didn't have soccer in school till we went to that school. So it gave me a little more diversity in watching other kids. But at the end of the day, we still had a little Black history being taught, and most of it repeated from what we already knew. So it wasn't nothing, greater than what we already knew or had been taught. And my high school years, my 9th through 12th grade years, I went to a predominantly Black school. We had a few whites. The few whites that went to school with us, they were the minority, and we were the majority. But we didn't have any fights with the white kids. We embraced them, and we had a good time with them. And it's one guy that we all think about when we go to class reunion. We've like, where is Louis Diot? Because he was this cool white kid that we all enjoyed and didn't mind hanging around him. Now, we never go home with him or anything like that, but he was cool. And just and I was laughing to myself because in my 5th grade year, I fought this young lady, which was white. We was in the park. I never got reprimanded about it because I can't remember what happened, but she had to do something to trigger me. And my teacher knew that. I never got sent down to the dean's or the principal's office or anything like that. But the next year when we were back into I'm trying to figure out, because I was trying to think, how did me and her get to be the best of friends? And my mom took her home after a basketball game that we used to play on Saturdays. My mom took us out to eat and all that. So it's interesting how we can be so understanding and so forgiving. And that's what I've always been taught, to be understanding and forgiving. And my parents never taught me about racism. And I'll never forget, I was living in Virginia. Miles Monroe had a speaking at the Founders Inn, which was white. And he taught on racism is taught, and you're never born with it. And that radiated with me because I was like, yeah, you are so right. That has to be taught, Because if you put two babies in a nursery and they don't know color from color, they will play together. So is young kids. But I will never forget, my oldest daughter went with my mom to this bowling alley. My mom was on the bowling team. And my mom said, my daughter saw this little white girl. She was sitting by herself just like she was and wanted to play with her. And she wouldn't play with her. She said, I don't want to play with you. And I don't know verbatim or what the words were. But we didn't teach racism at home. And I guess the way the little girl must have said, I don't want to play with you, it broke my daughter's heart. My mom said she's never seen her cry like that before. And it's sad to say, when she was in the military, she had a incident where this officer left them hanging in Iraq and not giving their group, trying to disperse them because they had ran off and they had hit a mine and caused injury to one of the people. That this officer did not stop and help them. They actually stayed out there all night, protecting like they're supposed to each other. And praise God, nothing happened. But today, my daughter said, Ma, I don't have no white friends. And I said, out of all your travel, she said, no, I don't. She said, I don't. She said, and it's not intentional. It just seemed like my environments have always been predominantly Black. And I was like, but you done been from here to Afghanistan and different ones. She said, yeah, but my associations were not with the white, and that made me think. And I said, Lord, if I fail with her, help me correct it with my youngest. So when I did take my youngest out of private school, I put her in public school. And I specifically put her in a predominantly, it was like 55% white, 35% Black, and maybe 25% Asian and Latino. And she was able to adapt because I figured if she go off to school somewhere, she would need to know how to coincide with different cultures and different people other than her own culture. And she adapted well, and she ended up going into a HBCU anyway. But it's okay. She can be very diversified. She's learned that in her work environment, So it's those things that has been good, but it was something that we had to learn. And as they say, we as a people, I think we learn to do better if we know better. And that's where I think a lot of our young sisters and brothers miss it, because they see differently. They accuse it as opposed to saying, well, let me try to be a little different. Not that you change yourself, you just do better. That's all.
Well, I want to switch gently now to talking about culture. And it really matters how you define certain things. And your definitions truly come from your experiences, socially, psychologically, emotionally. It comes from what you've been through. So Merriam-Webster says culture is the customary beliefs, social forms, and material traits of a racial, religious, or social group. Also, the characteristics of everyday existence, such as diversions or a way of life shared by people in a place or time. So you have Black culture. Now, because people want to be politically correct, now they're calling it African American culture. But that's everybody that is of color under that umbrella. Okay? So because I've talked to my biological folks over the years, we can't trace any African descending anything. We can trace some Native American, but we cannot trace any, African awareness or African, So culture is different. Culture is describing the way of everyday existence. So then there's your race or your ethnicity. That's a culture. Then you have your family. That's a culture. Then you go to school with all kinds of people, all kinds of races and ethnicity. That's a culture, the school culture. Okay. Then some go to church. You're Episcopalian, you're Catholic, you're Presbyterian, you're Lutheran, you're Seventh-day Adventist, you're Jehovah's Witness, you're Southern Baptist, you're the Black Baptist. I mean, it's and that's a culture. Church people are a culture. Now, within that, I'm gonna stay within the church for a minute because you got the Sunday go to meeting folk. That's a culture. They just go to church on Sundays. Curse you out Friday and Saturday, but they're in church Sunday. They go to church at Easter time and they make watch night service. That's the Sunday go to meeting folk. They go to church and they believe in God. Huh?
And Mother's Day.
And Mother's Day, because they're going to go to Red Lobster or Golden Corral afterwards. Okay. That's a culture. People who like Golden Corral, people who like Red Lobster. That's a culture. Because it's a way of thinking. It's shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices. So you got the denominational religious people. Then you got the non-denominational. They don't adhere to a religion, but you call everybody religious. There's the faith community. That's a culture. Okay. So we got to start there. And it goes into institutions, organizations. It's everywhere. It's a set of values or conventions or social practices. I got a biological member that said, well, I'm a Baptist. I'm a Diet Baptist. I said, well, I can hardly wait till your death because I want to see how we bury you differently from the other people. I went to a Jehovah's Witness funeral of my dad's twin sister, scared to death. Because I kept saying, well, where's the body? And why we were like in the gym part. And I'm like, well, and all my cousins were there. They hadn't seen me for 19 years. But anyway, I'm like, well, and I was asking my cousin, what we doing? So then this Caucasian gentleman gets up and begins to talk about my auntie, my Aunt Willamette. And I turned to one of my cousins. I said, who is he talking about? He ain't talking about Aunt Willamette. He's talking about how nice she was and she was faithful and we could depend on her. And I'm like, who is he talking about? Everybody, shh. No, I want to know who he talking about. Because I thought this was in Willamette's funeral. I don't see the body. I didn't see the urn that was sitting up there. I didn't see. I'm like, well, where the coffin at? This is how Jehovah's Witnesses bury people. Let me get out of here. Because this is really eerie. I don't know what y'all going to do to me. I really don't. I don't know what to expect. But I said, and Willamette was very mean. She was very mean to the family. She didn't have a nice word to say about anybody. She baked a peanut butter cake one time, and my daddy's like, well, what the? And that was a twin brother, and it hurt her feelings. She thought she was doing something. She baked a peanut butter cake. My daddy had nothing but dentures. He's like, what am I supposed to do with this? How am I supposed to eat that? But anyway, so I got to see my cousins. That's all I'm gonna say. But I kept saying, is it over? Did y'all have a program? Do y'all do this all the time? That's a culture. And we came from traditional burial programming. but they had it their own way. So I want everybody to understand, I want our audience, and I want us to commit to, ask the person, how do you define culture? Do you know there's a difference, is there a difference between race and ethnicity, nationality? Let's start. We got to go back to the beginning of this because, let me go back to this. A famous slave owner back in the day called William Lynch owned a lot of slaves. And he convened a meeting, said, all slave owners, come meet at my plantation. I got a secret I got to share with you. And his secret was, I quote, in which he tells other slave masters that he has discovered the secret to controlling Black slaves by setting them against one another. And he put that into play. He said, put your lighter skinned Negroes in the house and put your darker skinned Negroes in the field. And you keep them apart. The men and the women, keep them apart because the baby's going to come in and look at nappy head and everything. He told them, he said, if you do this right, you can own a slave. We can put this into history for the next 300 years. While today we are not in chains, physical chains, that is, but we're in psychological chains. And not only Black people, not only people of color. You all got to see this movie on Netflix called You People with Eddie Murphy, Nia Long, and the other young lady who was married to Nipsey Hussle. Nipsey Hussle, I think that's his name. You got to see this, how that conversation, they think they're doing right, but they going back and forth. You got to see that movie. It's on Netflix. It's a beginning of a conversation. It's a beginning of a conversation. And that's the whole thing about race theories. First of all, I want to focus on the word theory. I come from the school of social work. Everything we do is based on a theory. We have the DSM-3, I guess it's volume 15 by now. It's about this thick still. It's about this thick. Every diagnosis, psychiatric diagnosis is in that book. Every, even eating chalk and sand now. Every diagnosis is in that book. Cultural, racial stuff is in that book. If it's in there, we can diagnose you. So there's words for it. They've already defined it. They're defining it, things left and right that we thought was just this, but actually they put a word to it. Somebody did. You got to go back. You got to slow it down a little bit. So everything's a theory. So I would rather ask you, if I feel that there's some tension in the room, I'm going to ask, can we talk? I'm not going to call nobody out. I'm not going to prejudge somebody from what I see, because they may not even recognize or realize what they are displaying. But I want to talk to you. What's been your experience? What's been your memory? How were you raised? That'll tell you right there. Now, real briefly, I know we only got a few more minutes, but real briefly for me, up until fourth grade, I was in an all-Black school in Palm Beach County, all-Black elementary school. My biological aunt used to come in my room, my math class, and tell me that my father was not my father, her brother was my father. And I would go home, and I'm hoping my cousins will forgive me. My aunt is deceased now, God rest her soul. I'd go home and say, Mommy, this big lady came in my math class again. And she said, Daddy's not my daddy. I'm fourth grade. So my mom went to this principal who was white and said, look, she's just fourth grade. Just can you talk to her And the principal was like, "Oh no, I'm not getting in the middle of that. That's a family thing. I'm not getting in the middle of it." She's one of my best teachers. So my mother wasn't asking her to get fired. She was just saying, "Can you pull her to the side and talk to her?" So my mom looked in the phone book, the yellow pages, back in the day, and found this school that was next door across the street from the bank. And it was called St. Francis of Assisi School. My parents didn't understand that it was a different religion. They never balked at the fact that they had to pay tuition for me to go. They never said anything about my uniform, but they made sure I was dressed accordingly. And my mother, unlike my parenting skills, I walked my children in as far as I can go. When on their first day to school, my mother dropped me off at at the little rail thing, and she said, "I'll see you at 3." And I'm like, "Huh?" And she was going, and I looked at this, all these white people. And the next time we come back, I'll share some more along the way when we do part 2. But and you'll hear my difference and the reason why, and I can see why, because it's about, my ministry is about my future and the work that I have to do on this earth. But you got to dial it back a little bit and ask the difficult question: what did you experience? What was your experience? Now, I don't want to get off of here without acknowledging the holidays. We've had the Groundhog Day, and then there's Rosa Parks Day, and we all know her history. Had it not been for her, we had World Cancer Day, and International Day of Zero Tolerance for Female Genital Mutilation, and that's that African experience that young girls have gone through in some other countries as well, some other nationalities and culture. What's the culture? And I'm really concerned right now. And then I'm gonna have one of you guys close us out real quick. The anger. The world is angry. It's not certain people, it's the world. The world is angry right now. And they're lashing out and they're saying things, and they're not apologizing for it. They just making some crazy mistakes. And so Tommy or Trey, if y'all want to just close us out, we only have less than 3 minutes.
Well, I guess Tommy's waiting. Yeah. I'm just gonna say. I'm just gonna say
that because you better at this than I am. But I just want to ask this one question. Just one question. That book that you're speaking of, my daughter's a psych major, and she talked about that book have all the diagnoses. But my question is, and I'm asking the audience, they can answer this on our next turn. Is this book for all cultures or just one culture? That's all I want to ask. Is it for all cultures or is it for one culture? And that's my question. Go ahead, Trey. You got it.
Yeah, I think it's for all cultures. From the DSM, I think it's DSM-5. I think that's what it's not a different. I don't know, Tommy. Yeah, I can't answer that. I know we utilize that. I don't particularly, but those who have their license or license eligible, they use it to do diagnosis for the people that we work with. So we'll have a basis of what we need to do from there. So at least you want to take us home with that. So
it is meant to be for anybody experiencing or displaying the episodes that's described in it. Now it is biased depending on who's sitting in front of you, and we can talk about that next time. But yeah, it's supposed to be diagnosis based and not culture based or skin color based. It's supposed, but it's biased because guess who wrote the book?
Was it
See you next week, same time, same station.
Bye, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night, y'all. Be safe.
Bye.